So, unfortunately, those, and we're going to put a message up on the computer, the website, to let everyone know, those who might be trying to zoom in to the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and it will be posted. So if you have neighbors or other people you know who are interested or who were planning on zooming, please let them know that it will be posted online for them to watch after. And that is one of my first statements I want to make. This is a continuing conversation that we started with you a couple of years back on this project. But at this stage, we really need your help. And so if you're looking around the room and you have a neighbor who isn't here, it would be very helpful for you guys to start talking to one another, maybe pick up the phone, find out if they got their letter. We'll be doing the same. But whatever information you can share will just help everyone involved. So some of you, I know some of you came out to the original working informational workshop that we held a few years back to talk about this project. In that meeting, we broke off into groups and we asked you to identify what problems you're having with the road. And there are plenty. The road itself is in disarray, stormwater is bad, there's no sidewalks.
For recording, Kyle's request.
Okay, and there's line of sight issues, there's speeding, there's just a lot of issues on the road. So we took that information and we were able to compile it to try to identify what the top priorities were for the project itself. At that meeting, we also talked to you about the funding. So if you remember the Route 100 South TIF, which is a tax incentive finance district, it was set up many, many years ago for a project down on Route 100 that never materialized. So we asked the voters of Gray to allow us to add this project to that TIF district. And it does sound really mundane to talk about something like that, but it actually is going to provide the bulk of the funding that we need for this project without impacting the mill rate. So the funding is already being set aside for this project. It may not cover the entirety of the project. We will also be applying for a grant through the Maine Department of Transportation, and we'll be looking for them to input at least the maximum under that grant program, which is about $625,000. When we finally get to a price tag, we may not have enough of the money to cover what we want to do. And at that point, the council will have to sit down and talk about options. That may be reducing some of the scope of the project to reduce the cost of the project, or it may be us looking for additional funding avenues to complete the project as planned. So once that vote took place, the following year, the council was able to take some TIF money and set it aside to do three major things. The first of which was a full survey of the project area. So I think it's around 62 Yarmouth Road?
70.
70 Yarmouth Road down to Main Street. All of the impacted properties have been surveyed, and that helps us define where the lines are. The second big item that we completed was a ledge mapping or analysis. Everyone knows Weeks Hill is a big hill, and it's got a lot of ledge in there, but where is it, and how bad is it? And so we hired a firm with Will Haskell, who is the engineer, town's engineer, to help do some testing and try to figure that out, because that will impact the cost of the project. And the third thing, the major thing, was for Will to take all of the information we gathered in that informational session and come up with some draft plans. And these are just draft plans, but it's to give you a visual and an idea of what the project looks like and how it may impact your property. The next big step, which is this year's big step, is the right-of-way paperwork. So in that first informational session we had with you, we talked about the fact that there are no right-of-way documentation for this project. And before we can either go out to bid, to finalize what the plans look like, to go to construction, we need to address the right-of-way paperwork. And that is what tonight is about. So I'm going to turn it over to Town Manager Nate Rudy, because my final comment is this project is a community project. Everyone in this room is going to be the most impacted because you have property on the road, but it really impacts the whole town. Lots of people use the road. We're hoping that this project will help create or contribute to the revitalization of the village by creating a more safe environment for not only you, but everyone who's using it, whether they own property somewhere else in town, or they're renters, or they're business owners who own a business here but live somewhere else. So it's a larger picture project, and Nate is going to actually talk a little bit about how it interacts or is part of our village planning and our other infrastructure projects.
Hello, everyone. I know I haven't met all of you. I'm Nate Rudy, the town manager. Thank you all for coming out. As frequently is the case, Councilor Carter made my job a lot easier by setting everything up and telling you a lot of the stuff you needed to know. But what I want to share with you is this project is a very important component of the town's larger goals from the 2020 comprehensive plan. That some of you may have worked on the plan, you may have read the plan if you haven't. It's on the town's website, and the goal there is one of the goals is to revitalize the Gray Village and look for new business and real estate investment there. Another goal is to protect open spaces and environmentally sensitive areas. And in order to do that in rural parts of Gray, we need to find ways to encourage development along the existing corridors and in the Gray Village and try to find opportunities for new businesses, new housing, the kinds of places that you would like to walk to go meet a friend for lunch or coffee, or a physician's office, or other cultural amenities that are valuable to you. And then the third goal is to make the village area a more bicycle and pedestrian safe and friendly environment. And for you on Yarmouth Street or Yarmouth Road, this is one of the first phases of a multi-phase plan to make that vision possible. And my hope is that when the project is done, your neighborhood will be integrated into the village in a more walkable, pedestrian-friendly, more attractive, better curb appeal environment that accommodates what the DOT is going to do anyway. They're going to rebuild the road anyway. The question is, how well can we collaborate and cooperate with them so that when that road is rebuilt, it looks the way you would want it to look, and it makes your house, the street that your house is on, or your apartment, or whatever, what have you, as attractive and nice and pleasant a place to be as we can make it. The village plan that we worked on this summer, some of you may have come out for the block party, some of you may have come to this very room and participated in the open studio design process that the principal group helped us with. And you'll see some of the visual cues that people were interested in: calm streets, nice sidewalks, some street trees, places for people to go and be together outside, inside. All of that will be happening as part of this project, the whole street design part, but also adjacent to your neighborhoods. And we're looking to connect assets like the library and the new housing that's going to go in at the end of Hancock Street for affordable housing for older people, in with this idea about the village. And the hope is that when the village is revitalized, it will also revitalize the corridors coming into the village and create new opportunities there. And it will revitalize all of the neighborhoods that are connected there. So we know that Gray wants this because the voters came out and supported the comprehensive plan in droves back in 2020. We hope that you come away from this meeting this evening feeling well informed by Doug and Will about the next proposed steps in the process, and that we begin the process of answering your specific questions about the plan that's being proposed, and so that we can work together to try to make sure we get those questions answered. We are approaching what we would like to hope is the landing pattern into coming together with a plan that we can give to the DOT that they can start the engineering and working on. We're going to take our time working with you to make sure we get your questions answered, and that we visit with you, and that we've done everything we can to make everyone comfortable. But we're also working on a trajectory and a timetable that we want to try to do that work as expediently as we can, but also take good care to make sure that your questions are answered. So I'll stop there, hand the mic to Doug. And, if you have questions, we're here to answer them. And thank you very much for coming out. And please share this with your friends, your neighbors. We are recording this. Unfortunately, we can't broadcast it, but we'll make it available. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Doug Webster. I've been with the town for quite a few years at this point. I'm the planning director. Thank you for coming. And I assume that if you didn't use the sign-in sheet on your way in, please do so on the way out. All of you guys in the audience here have received letters. Most letters are for owners that are going to be asked to formalize the right-of-way. Many properties will need construction easements, temporary easements, and there's two handfuls or so of properties that have been identified that will likely need stormwater easements. We expect the meeting to be done between 7:30 and 8, and we'll wrap it up by 8 for sure. At the end of the meeting, just a quick heads up, be asked to fill out a brief questionnaire, ideally before you leave, to keep the progress going. Also, if you would like to sign up for a one-on-one meeting to go over any questions or concerns you have, there'll be a sign-up on the way out as you go by the clerk's area there. And we're hoping to do that this week if possible, either in person or Teams, Zoom, whatever. We also have individualized packets for each property owner, categorized by address. It has a map, which will be a 8.5 by 11, but a version of the plan that's your property, as well as a fact sheet that has relevant information that you can take home and look at and share with others in your household. Just some real brief background. DOT did most of the improvements to 115 in Gray in the mid-70s. They stopped about 1973. They tried for a couple more years to figure out a way to do the last 3,500 feet, 0.65 of a mile. They weren't able to do so. So here we are, coming up on 50 years later, trying to figure that out. Although Yarmouth Road this is a town project, but it's a state road. And so the right-of-way will actually need to be turned over to the state because it's a state road. But again, it's a town-driven project. Town is really trying to spearhead this. As the manager alluded to, we are hoping to wrap up the right-of-way work this winter and fine-tune the plans and record the right-of-ways at the registry this coming spring, summer. This fall of 23, go out to bid with construction in 24. There's a summary of most of this in the fact sheet in your packets. Stakeholders are obviously you guys here, the Yarmouth Road residents, the town, including the council, the staff. The town will be hiring on a property professional for the right-of-way. The water district is involved. They're putting in they're improving, they're adding a 12-inch new line to replace the old cast iron, I believe it is. And the state, obviously, because it's a state road. Councilor Carter touched on the funding. No sense repeating that. The project scope I touched on, again, is 3,500 feet, extending from the intersection of Yarmouth and Main, extending easterly to the portion that has the paved shoulder right around number 70, Yarmouth Road. Be adding a paved shoulder throughout this 3,500-foot section. Most of the project area has a 5-foot esplanade and a 5-foot sidewalk on one side. Stormwater, drainage improvements, realigning Brown Street to be directly opposite Hancock. And we're hoping to add street trees depending on the budget. Because of some DOT standards, if the trees are able to be included in the budget, they'll need to be on the back side, not the road side, because of the DOT standards. The right-of-way, the DOT standard is 66 feet. The town is pursuing 60 feet due to the existing conditions and the road limits. The 60 feet is needed for improvements to allow, perhaps in the future as a subsequent phase, sidewalks on both sides, the stormwater, the esplanade. So 60 feet is the right-of-way that you will see reflected on the plans here. So with that, I will turn the mic over to Will Haskell, who is the Vice President and Principal Partner with Goral Palmer, which is the town's consulting engineering firm. This might work if that's easier for you.
Okay.
I don't know, do you want to sit over here so people can?
Yeah, I just want to be able to make sure
I don't-
everybody can see me.
I'll make sure that's. So, thank you, Will.
All right.
I'll make sure.
Good evening, everyone. My name's Will Haskell with Goral Palmer Consulting Engineers. So we've been working on the design plans for this project with the town. I didn't grow up in Gray. I grew up in New Gloucester, but I did go to school here, so I'm quite familiar with the road. Used to ride the bus down this road many days. In younger years anyway. But so I think everybody's kind of given a good background of the project. I'll probably will repeat some of it a little bit here, and then we'll get into the plans. I think as Doug mentioned, we were looking at about 3,500 feet of roadway here from Main Street up to around 70 Yarmouth Road. Unfortunately, I was hoping to bring up a Google Earth map, which I could show you, but given that we don't have internet, never trust the internet, I guess. So I can't give you kind of an overall view very easily here. When you do leave, though, there is a plan out in the hallway there that's it's about 18 feet long. It basically shows the limits of the project from one end to the other. So that might be helpful for you in terms of visualizing the project a little bit better. But we'll get into the plans here in a minute. As you know, out on Yarmouth Road today, there is only a limited section of sidewalk, basically on the north side of the road, from about Brown Street up to, I believe it's around 19 Yarmouth Road. There's a 5-foot sidewalk in there that was actually reconstructed not too long ago as part of the Brown Street sidewalk project. But really, that's the only section of existing sidewalk on the road. So as several have mentioned, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the existing right-of-way. So basically from Main Street to roughly 18 Yarmouth Road, there actually is a formalized right-of-way in that section of road. It's 49.5 feet wide. From that location, number 11, number 18 Yarmouth Road, up to the end near 70 Yarmouth Road, there is no defined right-of-way. What the DOT calls that portion, it calls the ROUGHT portion. That's WROUGHT. So and what that means is that the right-of-way is defined by the occupation and use of that property by the roadway, the ditches, and the ditch slopes associated with the ditches. So basically the right-of-way line essentially follows the edges of the ditches and the used portion of the roadway there. So there isn't a defined width all the way up through there. It varies as you work your way up towards the end. As Doug mentioned, part of the plan with this project is to actually define a formal right-of-way, 60 feet wide, which will allow the town to construct the drainage, construct the new sidewalk, an esplanade in portions of the road. So an esplanade is like a grass strip in between the curb line and the sidewalk. And basically gives them the ability to go back in there in the future and maintain and repair that infrastructure as needed. So.
Can you explain the 60 feet? What does that mean? The 60 feet right away, is that the full length of the road in the ditches?
Yeah, so it's basically, it's really just the right-of-way lines are 60 feet wide, typically centered on the road. So if you went to the center line and you measured out 30 feet on one side, that would be the right-of-way on one side, and 30 feet on the other, that would be the right-of-way on the other side.
Thank you.
And basically, the land within that would be owned by the state in this case, but it would allow future operation and maintenance of the roadway and any infrastructure in there. So, as Doug mentioned, typically for a road of this category classification, DOT would normally want to require a 66-foot wide right-of-way, which is essentially a 4-rod road. That's another measurement term. We felt that given some of the constraints of the existing buildings and not infrastructure, but gardens, trees, plantings, other things within that, we felt it was more appropriate to go with a 60-foot wide right-of-way, and we feel that we can accommodate everything that we want to accommodate within that width. So we're not recommending going to the 66 feet. All right, so just wanted to get into a little bit of, Doug described briefly the scope of work. So we talked a little bit about the right-of-way. So the intent on this project is there's 3 or 4 different things that we want to accomplish. First of all, we want to reconstruct this section of road. So as you know, the road can be pretty rough sometimes. It's I think they've overlaid it. I don't know when the last time it was overlaid.
3 years ago.
3 years ago or so. But as Doug said, it never really was what's called a built road. So we're going to go in and we're going to do a full depth reconstruction, which what that means is take off all the existing pavement, excavate down, excavate out any material underneath that pavement, and put back a full-blown designed road bed consisting of a certain amount of gravel and then a certain amount of pavement on top of that. So it ends up being a roadway that is built. It's less prone to frost action in the springtime. It's designed for the traffic that is going over it. So that's kind of piece number 1 that we want to accomplish as part of this. Second piece is adding a sidewalk. So we're looking at adding a sidewalk. It's actually going to flip-flop from one side to the other, and we'll get into that in a minute. But that's a big component of this project, is to construct a sidewalk from Main Street up to Brown Street. Then it will cross the road to the south side of the road and go from Brown Street up to Hillcrest on the southerly side of the road. From Hillcrest to the end at 70, or roughly around 70 Yarmouth Road, we're going to widen the shoulders on both sides in that area to 4-foot wide shoulders. So we're not going to construct sidewalks, or at least the intent right now is not to construct sidewalks all the way to 70 Yarmouth Road. Finally, I guess not finally. So another piece of this Doug mentioned as well was Brown Street. Everybody knows the lovely intersection of Brown Street with Yarmouth Road and the issues with that intersection. So what we're proposing to do with Yarmouth Road, or Brown Street, excuse me, is to tee it into Yarmouth Road, basically directly across from Hancock Street. So make it a nice kind of teed off intersection there. And what that will do is it will reduce the high speed traffic coming down the hill and just wheeling onto Brown Street the way they currently do. It will require slowing that traffic down substantially to make a right-hand turn there. Additionally, if you're coming out Brown Street to Yarmouth Road, you come to a full stop intersection. It's a stop intersection today, but it's teed up with Yarmouth Road, so you can actually see in both directions before you actually make your turn, whichever way you're gonna go there. So that's an important safety component as well to the project. And finally, Doug mentioned Gray Water District. So there's the existing infrastructure out in the roadway consists of some pretty old cast iron water mains out there. And they are proposing to replace all the cast iron water main with new 12-inch diameter water main, basically all the way from Main Street up to Hillcrest. So they would replace all the existing water main infrastructure with a new 12-inch main, and then they would reconnect or reconstruct all the water services to the right-of-way line and connect it all into that new 12-inch main. So everybody would be connected into that new water main, all the way up to Hillcrest. So those, yep. So there's existing stormwater infrastructure out there. As everybody knows, there's a fairly large ditch going up the north side of the hill.
I thought that was a moat.
So that flows down to a catch basin, kind of down towards the bottom that everybody probably sees. I think it's painted bright yellow. And maybe it's not now anymore, but there is. I have a hard time calling it a ditch on the south side of the road going up the hill, but in theory there's somewhat of a drainage channel up the south side shoulder. That comes down, and then there's a catch basin right at the end of Beehive Lane that actually collects most of that water. It actually collects the water from the north side ditch as well. It gets into that catch basin, comes across over to Beehive Lane, and then there's an 18-inch storm drain that goes out of that catch basin and discharges into a stream just behind the house there at Beehive Lane. Additionally, as you get a little bit further in towards Brown Street, there's another set of catch basins that discharges to a ditch. Trying to remember the numbers on that.
24-ish.
Might be 24. And that channel that runs out through kind of the field or meadow area there actually connects with the channel that comes in from Beehive Lane. So they actually connect into the same channel, and then they kind of run down behind the library and down towards Gray Meadow. The intent is to upgrade the storm drain system coming down the hill. Well, basically along the entire project, the storm drain system is going to be updated. Anywhere where we put in curbing next to sidewalk, there will be new enclosed drainage, so basically catch basins and an underground pipe system that collects the drainage and directs it essentially to the same outfall locations that are there today. I think there's 5 different outfalls on this section of road, and we can get into those when I get into the map. And in case anybody's has property next to those outfalls, we can certainly meet with you guys after the meeting and review them in more detail if necessary. So I think that touches on the proposed improvements in a little more detail and what's out there. So I like to think of the sidewalk project in kind of breaking the project up into 3 different areas. And again, when I get into the map, you'll see this. But first section is from Main Street to Brown Street. It's roughly about 725 feet. Right now, we're proposing the sidewalk to be on the north side of Yarmouth Road in that section from Main Street to Brown Street.
Is it okay to ask questions now, or would you rather wait till the end? Just want to be polite.
Yeah, why don't you, if you can hold it to the end, and then we'll touch on that. We'll have it a question and answer at the end. I think that would be
Absolutely.
That would be good. Appreciate that. So in that section, we are proposing essentially a curb and sidewalk on the north side. It'd be a 5-foot wide sidewalk, bituminous sidewalk, asphalt sidewalk. No esplanade, so basically no grass strip between the curb and the sidewalk. The sidewalk would be butted right up against the back of the curb, similar to Brown Street, if you're familiar with the sidewalk on that section of road. Second section would be Brown Street to Hillcrest. Now that's a little bit longer, a little over 2,100 feet. So basically at Brown Street, we're proposing to actually cross with a crosswalk and cross to the south side of Yarmouth Road, and then run all the way up to Hillcrest on the south side of the road. So in that section, again, proposing vertical granite curb and sidewalk with a 5-foot grass esplanade in between the curbing and the sidewalk. So trying to get that sidewalk pulled away from the road a little bit, makes everybody feel a little bit safer as they're walking on the sidewalk, gets them a little bit further away from the traffic. Also gives you a strip in there that you can do some maybe low plantings. Not sure we can plant trees in there yet. We've got some DOT terminology here, clear zone things that we need to think about relative to the speed and the annual traffic on the road. We may not be able to put large trees in that esplanade. We may have to shift them to the back of the sidewalk because of the clear zone requirements. But we're still kind of evaluating that as we move forward. And then the third section is Hillcrest to 70 Yarmouth Road, roughly about 650 feet. Again, no sidewalk is being proposed in that section at the moment, but we are proposing to widen the shoulders and construct basically 4-foot wide shoulders on both sides of the travel way in there. In all sections of this road, we're looking at 11-foot travel way with 3-foot shoulders, except for that section beyond Hillcrest where it would be 4-foot shoulders. So basically you'd end up with 28 feet from curb to whatever's on the other side, if it's going to be curb or shoulder. So that kind of gives you a summary. I'd like to kind of scroll through some of the plans and show you a few key pieces here that may trigger a few more questions and things. So I'm going to try and zoom in here so I can give everybody the best view that I can. It's a little bit hard to see these on the screen, especially for you guys up in the backs, which is a little unfortunate, but we'll do the best we can here. So starting here down at Main Street, so here's Main Street intersection. We've got the mobile station on this corner, Manny Motors on this corner. The aerial photo on this is a little bit dated, so it doesn't show the current Village Green Park in here. Aroma Joe's is here, so just to get everybody oriented a little bit. So basically you're seeing the sidewalk again on the north side of the street over here. We've got a little bump out here. This is definitely not finalized yet, but one of the things that we've been talking about with the council and folks at the town is trying to incorporate some on-street parking. So this is an 8-foot kind of parking lane here. You may be wondering if you're familiar with Village Green, there actually is a curb cut in here that allows people to drive in and park in the little paver area there. One of the things that we've been chatting about is potentially closing that curb cut off and allowing people to park in the parking lane out on the road versus having to pull in and out of the Village Green space itself. So we're not ignoring the curb cut that's there. It's just we're thinking at this point of trying a little bit different parking scheme there.
If I can, the blue line is the proposed edge of the 60.
Good point.
Blue,
So
blue.
So on this plan, the yellow lines, if you can everybody see my cursor? So yellow line here and here, that's your established 49.5-foot right-of-way. In this section, the blue lines are the proposed 60-foot right-of-way. So as you can see, you know, there's a little strip of land here on both sides that would require, you know, taking some additional right-of-way and working with the landowners to accomplish that. So thank you, Doug, for mentioning that. So I'm going to scroll up Yarmouth Road a little bit more. So these are in plan sheets, so I'm going to have to shift plan sheets here. But again, Aroma Joe's is here. So we've got the church. You can just see off the edge of the page right here. So this is the Congregational Church here. And you can, one thing I will mention, that here is one of the drainage outfalls that I was talking about earlier. There's an existing drain pipe that comes in between the church and the Tombarelli property, I believe, that comes from Brown Street. Comes into existing catch basin here on both sides of the road, and then it outfalls to a drainage channel on the southerly side of the road that ultimately works its way down towards the plaza and ultimately Gray Meadows.
So the yellow are all drains, that's all plumbing?
What's that?
What's the yellow lines again, that's all drains? Is that,
The yellow lines are the right-of-way lines.
okay, oh, that's the existing.
Yeah, so the yellow lines are existing right-of-way, the blue lines are proposed right-of-way.
Does the yellow line also represent existing property lines?
It does, well, in this section it does, because this is a defined right-of-way in this section of road, and I'll when we get to the next sheet, I'll show you where that defined right-of-way ends and the rot portion begins. So, yes, so there is, if just for rough purposes, I think you're looking at between the yellow line and the blue line in this area right here is probably 5 or 6 feet. A little bit less on the south side of the road, the way it's drawn here. So I'm going to shift to the next page, which will show Brown Street and the church.
Full screen, is that an option?
I don't know. I think I can get rid of the menu bar there.
Move your cursor around and you'll see, go to the bottom.
Trying to
right
get the
there.
image
Back
bigger.
full screen icon.
Let's try that.
Yeah, it helps a little bit.
All right, so this shows what we're proposing, how we're proposing to reconfigure the Brown Street intersection. So in the aerial, you can see how Brown Street comes out and intersects Yarmouth Road at the nice tip of the triangle there. And in here, you can see what we're proposing to do is to basically curve that around and tee into Yarmouth Road at more of a 90-degree intersection, which improves sight distance and safety. Also will work towards slowing people down that are coming down Yarmouth Road and want to turn onto Brown Street here to make a right-hand turn onto Brown Street. Additionally, we would reconfigure the crosswalks at this location. We will look at whether we can add flashing beacons at this crosswalk location that crosses Yarmouth Road at this location. So flashing beacons, if you're familiar with the Short Shaker Road section by Fiddlehead and Gray Park, there's a flashing beacon at that location that people can push a button, turns on the flashing strobe lights when they want to cross the street. We will look at trying to put that in here as well at this location.
Right here at Pennell too, right here.
Yep. Yep.
What happens to the existing road where it stops? Are you gonna fill that in with something?
Yeah, so the road would be, basically the road section would be removed in that area. Usually what we end up doing is you may scrape off some of the gravel that's in there, but you'd scarify the gravel with a, like a backhoe bucket with teeth on it or something, and then you would put a good layer of loam over the top of that and plant it with grass, or you could, we've talked about potentially putting in some sort of a small pocket park or something there with some benches or some feature that would be a little gathering spot or whatever. So we haven't come up with the final details on that, but so there's a lot of different opportunities there that we can look at as we move forward.
Would the existing sidewalk stay? That's on the north side?
It's a good question. Initial discussions have been that the sidewalk on that north side from here, basically to where it ends, could potentially be removed, but I don't think we've necessarily nailed that down completely with the town, and we're certainly interested in any feedback from you folks here tonight as to what your preference would be on that. But I think initial discussions have been thinking about removing it and requiring people to cross the street here rather than adding another crosswalk further up. Which
I mean, just to me, it seems you're making people go into the road, which is not safe. Because so if you're on the north side, you have to cross to the south side, then cross back to the north side. And you're putting yourself, people fly down that street, they don't see that crosswalk.
Yeah.
You can't even make it out at all from up on the hill, you don't even know it's there.
Yeah. No, it's a good point, and I think it's a good discussion topic that we definitely haven't nailed it down, so it's not a done deal that we're going to remove it. So we'll certainly take note of that and talk about that more.
What about the street parking that's next to the church now?
Yeah,
It looks like that's gonna be completely gone. And if people are still parking there, you can't see past them on Sunday when you're trying, coming off of Brown and all of that.
Yeah.
The library parking lot is empty at the same time.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, we should probably try to do as much of the corridor as we can.
Okay. I'm going to touch on the on-street parking, and then we can move on. So you're right. There is some existing on-street parking there on Yarmouth Road, or it's informal on-street parking at the church. Constructing the sidewalk on the north side, like we have it shown in here, really would not allow that to happen anymore, and we really can't accommodate a widened parking lane there because of issues with the accessible access to the church. There's a little walkway that runs right up the side of the church there, kind of parallel to Yarmouth Road, that provides accessible access to the building, and we just don't have enough room there to accommodate a sidewalk and an 8-foot parking lane like we did back out towards Main Street. So it's going to be very difficult, and when you add a vertical curb in there with a sidewalk, it's basically going to eliminate those parking spaces along Yarmouth Road in front of the church there.
Which is great for traffic, but what if they're losing some parking, so what happens to the people of the church?
We've got to continue to have that discussion. All right, I'm going to continue on. So as we scroll up past Brown Street, basically at this point here, right in front of 13 and 20 Yarmouth Road, you can see where the yellow line basically comes across Yarmouth Road here. That is where the defined right-of-way, the defined 49.5-foot right-of-way ends. And that's where the rot portion begins and continues on up the hill to the end of this project. So from this point on, the yellow lines that you see are the rot portion. It's weird terminology, but the rot portion right-of-way lines. And I will say at this point, they are the preliminary rot lines because we took those lines from a previous preliminary survey that the DOT had done, and I'm not convinced that those rot lines encompass the entire utilized portion of the road. So, for example, they don't necessarily incorporate the back slope of the ditch on the north side of the road, for example. So I think those lines may need to be adjusted a little bit more to actually encompass the utilized portion of the road. Again, you can still see the blue lines, which are the proposed 60-foot right-of-way lines on both sides of the road here. And then the other change that you will see as we shifted over, crossed over to the south side of the road, now you can see that there's a 5-foot gap in between the curb line and the sidewalk. So we've added that 5-foot esplanade from this location all the way up the hill. So I'm going to continue on, and then we can get into more details with the Q&A. So I think I went beyond where I wanted to go. So sorry about that. Back on this plan. So there's a culvert crossing and a catch basin here at this location, which is, this is 24 Yarmouth here. This is, can't see it, 17 Yarmouth over here, and 15 Yarmouth here. So there's an existing drainage outfall that discharges into a swale or a ditch that runs kind of out through these properties out behind and then connects into the drainage channel that comes in from Beehive. But there's also another catch basin just up the road here that also ties into that ditch system. The culvert picks up a ditch on the north side of the road that appears to come in from this property or somewhere coming in from kind of the Pennell property here that gets collected into this system as well and conveyed under the road to that ditch system.
Will, can you put your cursor where the black line is, just to point out that that must be the edge of the sidewalk?
The edge of sidewalk?
Yeah.
So the
that line there, that black line, can you explain what that is, please? One that's running along the road.
Yeah, so that's the curb line.
Okay.
That black line it's a vertical granite curb. We're not proposing to use bituminous curb or anything like that. We're looking at a vertical granite curb in here. Then there's the 5-foot esplanade or grassed section, and then the gray strip is the 5-foot wide sidewalk.
Okay, thank you.
And this black line that crosses from one side of the road to the other is actually the culvert or storm drain pipe with a catch basin out at the curb line here on this side. So I'm going to continue on. So here we are at Beehive. Again, there's some existing drainage infrastructure that we're going to be replacing and upgrading here and tying in some new catch basins coming down the hill on this side of the road. So basically this south side of the road is going to have a new granite curb all the way along up until the end of the sidewalk. And we'll be putting in new catch basins spaced appropriately to collect the drainage coming down the hill. It will all come into this catch basin. This is an existing catch basin that will be replaced here at Beehive Drive. And I've got another plan that I can show when we get into the details of the drainage, but this is the outlet pipe here, 18-inch outlet pipe that discharges to a drainage channel pretty much right behind this house here. And there's some other drainage that comes in on Beehive from the old interurban right-of-way as well, that collects drainage from the old electric rail line that went through here back in the day and discharges it down to this drainage ditch. So this is where the road starts to get steeper as we go up the hill. Looking at, I think it gets to the 8 or 9% slope range as we run up the hill here, which is pretty steep, but it's so I don't see anything else that I need to touch on there right at the moment. Again, we've added a few catch basins going up the hill to collect the drainage, so it all isn't just shooting down to the bottom and flooding out the catch basins down at the bottom. So right here, we're right in front of Apple Tree Village. So this is the parking lot for Apple Tree Village right here in the driveway. Continuing on, we get up to the, I think, top of the hill in this next, yeah. So in this next plan, we're actually, I haven't really been showing you the profile view of the road, but this section of the plan down below here actually shows what we call the profile of the road. So it's the profile of the center line of the road. If you look at it closely, there's a lighter dashed line in there, which is the existing road profile, and the heavier solid line is what's the proposed road profile. So we're actually looking to try and peel off the crest of that hill a little bit and make it a little bit safer vertical curve coming down over the hill there. So we're actually lowering the center line profile of the road there by about a foot or so to try and improve safety as we come up over the crest of that hill. So we get up to a high point in here, and this is where the drainage breaks at the high point. So in this direction, it heads down towards Beehive, and in this direction, headed eastbound, it actually gets connected into, there's a cross culvert up here just beyond 59, I believe, or near 59, and ultimately discharges onto the south side of the road, and I'll show you that in a minute. So here we are at Hillcrest. Sidewalk would end at this location, and then the road section would change. So we'd go from 11-foot travel lanes and 3-foot shoulders with a sidewalk or esplanade and sidewalk to basically 11-foot travel lane with 4-foot wide shoulders from here until the end of the project.
Can you go back to the beginning of that for a minute?
Beginning of this.
Yeah, just slide back this way, back towards 41.
41's on the
Water
neck
tower, the access road for the water tower, or the house in front of it.
at the water tower.
Yeah, 41 is us.
Yeah, so I think that's back.
Right there.
That's 39, so this is 41 here. Yeah, so the water tower driveway is right here.
Yeah.
Yep. Do you have a specific question, or?
No, I just want to see how far in the driveway we were losing.
Okay.
So when you guys, that's the line right now, that's the standoff, and that's what you guys are proposing, is the blue. So then is that gonna change our standoff? Because I was actually about to come down and start looking at permits and do a garage right there in front of my driveway. Because we have a big portion of driveway right there in front of our house. So I mean, that changes all that now. My standoff to the road just got a lot smaller.
Yeah, I can feel that.
Yep.
Yep, but you're in the, either you're in the village center district right now, the setbacks are, if you're VC or, you have a 10-foot front setback, so that wouldn't change that, but. Nope, the setback is measured from the edge of the right-of-way. So,
Setback would be off of the new.
So if we, so
That's
if
still
we
10
lose
feet.
right of way, though, then it changes it then?
it does, and if I could interject real quickly, I should have touched on this before. Simply because the right-of-way is shown, in many instances, even though the right-of-way is getting a little bit wider, many properties are not going to be affected at all. They're going to, it may be underground stormwater infrastructure, it may be a sidewalk, but the 60-foot right-of-way doesn't mean that there's going to be a road and that all of the property is going to be utilized. I guess I just kind of wanted to point that out. It wouldn't affect the current setback is 10 feet, so you have plenty of space.
Okay.
So.
All right, thank you.
All right, so let me, I'm just going to touch on the last sheet here, and then we can open it up to questions. So on this last sheet, again, you can kind of see drainage coming down. Here's that cross culvert that picks up ditch flow from the north side of the road. So this is 53 here, and this is 59 here. So it basically picks up ditch flow from the north side and discharges it over to the south side of the road. And then the end of the project is basically, I think we've been saying 70, but the actual end is kind of in between 59 and 63 and 62 and 70, basically.
The numbering didn't get done quite the way it probably should. Number 70 is opposite number 63, so it's crazy.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some historical reasons for that, but I can't speak to them.
Let me just make sure I've covered everything I want to cover, and then we can open it up. I think I've hit on everything, so.
All set? Okay. So, folks, before we go into the Q&A section, I just want to make a couple program notes. Before you leave, Doug and the planning department have assembled a packet of materials specific to each of your properties. So there'll be maps that are blown up into these sections, wherever your property is, you'll get a section map. You'll get property information related to your property specifically, and then there'll be a map of the project as well. Not the entire map?
It's focused on
Your section.
Your specific section.
So if you happen to need to leave before the Q&A or any of that's done, please be sure to pick up your packet. The other material that is in the packet is a questionnaire that we...
I'm going to hand it out.
Okay, great. A questionnaire that we'd like for you to fill out. And after you leave this evening, if you are, everybody's going to maybe have a different perspective. If you're all for the project, you love it, you can't wait for it to get started, we want to know that. If you still have some questions and you're not convinced yet and you want to have a follow-up meeting with us to talk about it, we're happy to do that. We want to know that. Wherever you are on the project, we'd like to hear back from you because it will help us with the next steps of the project and working with, we're going to hire a firm to work with us on getting the right-of-way material information together that we need to give to the DOT before the project can start. So it's important that we hear from all of you. The other thing I want to note for you is that as part of the Q&A or after the Q&A, we have a map for you on the wall outside in the hallway. That's all the maps that Will just showed you end to end, and you can take a look at it and sort of see where your property sits in the whole, scheme of things with the right-of-way proposed changes and all that sort of stuff. So please be sure to take a look at that. And then we will want to follow up with you very soon, if we can, to have those visits, those one-on-one conversations with you. And that's something that Doug and the planning office are going to work on with you. So we're happy to start scheduling meetings and visits and have those one-on-one question and answer sessions with you as soon as we can find a time that works for you. So I'll just leave it at that. And again, please, before you leave, grab your packet. And we'll have questions. Yes?
Will that map be left out in the hallway for a while?
Well, I think we'll leave it there. And at some point, maybe we'll move it into the planning office.
Okay.
But you should be able to.
Make sure they're asking their question into the mic.
Okay. Oh, sure. Okay.
Or repeat the question.
The question was, will the map be left up? And it will be. We'll keep it up for some time.
So I have a question for you. So you have sidewalks on one side of the road.
Microphone.
Yeah, I'll just leave it there. Would you identify yourself?
Sure. My first name is Michael. And you have sidewalks on one side of the road, and my question is, how does that benefit the people from the other side, as there's no crosswalks with lights to cross the busy road to get to the sidewalks? And as far as the sidewalk down on the end down here that's existing already, if you remove that, in a sense, you have to cross the road, go down to the intersection, cross the road again to get to the other side. It doesn't seem...
No, I think we've heard you on the short section on the north side, so we'll definitely be taking that into consideration. One of the challenges with these projects, it all comes down to cost eventually, right? So if we go and design this with a sidewalk on both sides of the road, I think from my understanding and working with the folks at the town so far, I think everybody would love to do that. I think there's a question of whether they can afford that right off the bat. So the intent is again, part of the intent with this 60-foot right-of-way is to provide enough right-of-way so in the future, if they can budget more money for a sidewalk on the other side of the road, that they will look at potentially constructing a sidewalk on the other side.
But down by the Fiddlehead School, they put in some crossing lights there with a crosswalk. Why not put a couple of those so that it enables people on the other side to get to the sidewalks? Because at this point, it's great to have the sidewalks, but a life is more valuable trying to cross that road to get to the sidewalks.
Yep, I understand your concern. At Fiddlehead, and similarly with out here, we have sidewalks on both sides of the road. So if we build a crosswalk and flashing beacons at a location, we have to actually have a physical landing pad on the other side of the road to for people to go to and use. So again, there's some...
It just doesn't seem practical to have it on one side when you have no access to get to that sidewalk without crossing the main drag there with traffic flying at 70 miles an hour down that road.
I just want to clarify what Will just said. That's not a rule we have in the town. That's a DOT rule. So in order to have a crosswalk, we have the same situation on Shaker Road. If you're familiar with Hannaford intersection right down the road, Spruce Street, we have a lot of kids that like to run across that road. We'd love to put a crosswalk there. We have to build a sidewalk from Hannaford to Spruce and then have to have a landing on the other side in order to put that crosswalk on. We are working on that. But as Will stated, we may find when we do the project that we have enough money to do everything we want. It's more likely, given the last 2 years, the increase in construction costs, that that's not going to be the case. So obtaining the right-of-way, as he said, gives us the opportunity to come back and do a second phase. But your point is well taken. It's something we've talked about.
It doesn't seem beneficial to have it on one side of the road, to have the sidewalk when nobody from the other side can access that sidewalk.
Yep. And I think...
that everyone uses.
Yep.
On the north side, so there's not going to be any sidewalk there anymore?
Yep. And to your point, we have talked about crosswalks. The other issue with crosswalks, I believe, is you have to have a proper line of sight. And because the road has that crest and comes straight down, having a crosswalk there would actually put pedestrians in danger if they were using the crosswalks, if the road... Yep.
Sidewalks, that doesn't benefit us, the sidewalk on the other side of the road.
Well, it benefits, you're right. It benefits the people on the other side, and you do have to walk a little further if you want to take advantage of that, potentially, depending on...
Down the side of the road now, because there's no sidewalk from where we are on 25 down. So you take a chance to get hit now, it's gonna be the same if there's no sidewalk later on,
Yeah, the project
side of the road.
The project is absolutely not going to be able to solve all the problems in phase one. It just isn't going to be able to. Did you want to state your question again?
No,
Okay, because I'm just going to remind everyone, it's great that you're sharing, but you have to wait until you have the microphone or the people on the recording cannot hear anything that you said. As far as that discontinued sidewalk, as Will said, we haven't come up with a plan for that area, so it's great to hear that, and we'll keep that in mind when we get there.
Well, we've lived on the extension to the Oxford Plains Speedway now for 36 years. I think mostly it's a matter of enforcement. But I'm wondering, a lot of the water ends up in our driveway, the Woodage driveway, and the old Kennedy House driveway, and the road is a little too high. Are they going to dig down a little bit so that maybe that's not going to happen? Because over a period of generations, that we've seen pictures from years ago, that roadbed definitely goes like this every time they make an improvement. And right now, every time it rains, I have to shovel the sand out of our driveway, and I know the folks down the street too. So just wondering if they're going to go down.
So this is the main reason why we want to have these meetings, so we can get the institutional knowledge of all these different situations, because it's very difficult for us as designers to figure all of that information out just by looking at a plan and going out in the field and looking at things. So we definitely want to talk to you, and we want to understand how the drainage works at your driveways, and we will look at ways to improve that. So if lowering the road makes the most sense, then we'll look at doing that. At this point, there was not a significant amount of profile change, at least where I'm understanding your driveways to be.
What was your number?
We can look at that.
Closing the driveway is
25.
Did you say 23? 23 Yarmouth as well.
My driveway gets flooded.
Okay, thank you. 25 too.
And if I may, this is exactly, if there are concerns that you have for your specific property, this is exactly why we're trying to set up the one-on-one meetings. This is really helpful information. We want to incorporate it into the plans as much as we can. This is really helpful information. That's why we're having this meeting.
Hi, my name's Liz. I live at 6 Yarmouth Road, across from the community garden in Aroma Joe's. And yes, institutional knowledge. I've lived there for 12 years. My first question is, I'm not an engineer. I'm an elementary school teacher. Can you tell me why you decided to put the sidewalk across the street on the north side versus on the south side? It seems to me, if you're going up the north side and then you get to the church and you have to cross the street to then go up the sidewalk on the other side of the street, help me make sense of that. First of all, I'm also really pleased about all of this. You've done a lot of work. A lot of people have been involved. It's evident with the material that you're presenting to us, so thank you for all of that. But if you could explain why, I mean, I guess I'm volunteering a little bit more land on my side to put a sidewalk on my side of the street just for the safety of pedestrians up the road.
Sandy, do you want to touch on that first?
Well, I think that the important thing to understand is, as Will said, if we could put sidewalks on both sides from the beginning to the end, we probably would. We know we can't afford that with the amount of money that we have set aside. Just as an example, if you want to share the amount of money it costs to extend to do the sidewalk on Shaker Road and to extend it, that was, I can't remember offhand, but close to.
Yeah, I don't have the the exact number in terms of the extension piece, but just the reconstruction of the sidewalks on Shaker Road was almost $800,000 construction costs.
For the sidewalks. So we're talking about doing the road, reconstructing the road, squaring an intersection, adding sidewalks, adding stormwater, adding catch basins. We want to make sure that whatever we can do in phase one will give us the best value for the amount that we can spend. The 60-foot right-of-way, as Will state, allows us to plan a phase two. We can't do that until we get right-of-way and do phase one. So if there...
I'm not asking for sidewalks on both sides.
No, and, yep, so...
Lines on the north side, not the south side, given that people have to cross over in front of the church.
Yeah, I think
Is there
that...
an engineering reason?
There's really no engineering reason in terms of, it was basically sitting down in a group with the council, with other members here of the town, and town staff, and saying, well, we've got to pick one side or the other, and
So I have a follow-up question then. So I have a front porch on my house, and I sit out there frequently, and I'd say, given my data, 100% of the time when people are walking down Yarmouth Road, they're walking on the south side. They're walking in front of my house. They're hitchhiking in front of my house. They're doing all kinds of things, but primarily it's on the south side. The only time I see somebody on the other side is if they're visiting the community garden. And it brings me to my next point, which is, logically, it doesn't make sense to me to ask pedestrians to cross over in front of the church to the south side proposed sidewalk. You've talked a little bit about the traffic being improved because people have to actually stop and then turn to get onto Brown Street. It would be interesting to me if you have any data about actually how many cars go Brown Street versus Yarmouth Road at that intersection, because I haven't stood out with a speed detector, but 50 miles an hour is pretty average in front of my house, and I'm two lots down from the mobile station. Coming up, and I know this isn't part of this plan, but when we had the workshop this summer, the consultants that were here were talking about when people come off the highway, they come up to our village and they see highway signs, which leads them to think, oh, we're still on the highway, so we can go fast. Instead of smaller, oh, this is a village, let's go slowly. So people, if that light at 26 and coming up into Yarmouth Road, if that's green, it's not 50 miles an hour coming by my house. It's more like 60. And I'm not being dramatic. This is just from sitting on my front porch. So I have trouble crossing the street just to go to the community garden. So I'd like to think about the sidewalk being on the north side versus the south side, given the crosswalk up at the church. And then one more thing, there have been a lot of surveyors and people from the state and from the town doing all kinds of things, and I always go out, hey, what are you doing? What's going on? And in one of those conversations, this is unofficial, they said, but there was a possible traffic light proposal for that spot at the church, so that traffic could actually stop when they came down the hill. So I guess we can talk more individually, but the speed between Main Street and the church is a huge problem, and I'm worried about that crosswalk.
Yeah, and just to go back to what Will was saying about north versus south, I think initially part of the thought process with having it on the north side versus the south is the existing sidewalk structure on Main Street coming around versus having to, because the sidewalks that go down Route 100 South are not really sidewalks anymore. It's like some sad little path that's broken apart. So I think that was part of it. If through conversations with the property owners on that side, it makes more sense to have it on that side, if we can have the appropriate crosswalks, then we're more than open to that. I mean, it's just a matter of, it's the same amount of sidewalk. And so it's just location. As far as the speed goes, we are well aware of the speed issues, very much so. Part of the problem is the Yarmouth Road beyond the crest is 45 miles per hour. We have repeatedly asked the DOT, and we did it again this year, to please come and evaluate it and reduce the speed, and they refuse to do it. The DOT sets speed limits. We do not. So, having said that, we can do improvements to the road, adding sidewalks, adding esplanades, adding crosswalks, adding what they call friction, which is bump outs, trees, that type of thing. That changes their calculation. So when they come and they look at a road like Main Street, which is as wide as can be in all pavement, that is a safe environment for cars to go faster. If it's narrow lanes, sidewalks, trees, friction, they have to reduce the speed because it's no longer safe for the cars to go that speed. So part of the improvement result hopefully will be want to reduce speed limit. That doesn't mean people are going to follow it, but it gives us a little bit more leverage with our deputies to start enforcing it. Having less of a grade, squaring that intersection will slow some traffic down. We are also looking at changing the Route 26, removing it off Short Shaker, and making the trucks actually go and use the bypass. We are also looking at changing that intersection itself into a square, which is a separate project. So one thing isn't going to change it, but we're hoping multiple things will change that.
So I don't live on Yarmouth Road, but I noticed that we've improved Route 26 with sidewalks and right away, like shoulders and stuff. But do cars go 30 miles there? I don't even think it's marked 30 miles an hour at all. I've driven from Hannaford coming to the village. There's no speed limit sign at all telling you what it should be. And just because you have a pretty new street with sidewalks on both sides and trees doesn't slow the traffic down.
So a lot of times new streets speed the traffic up because they look more like a slot car track. And what we're trying to do is, to Councilor Carter's point, add visual cues and interest to people so that they understand that your neighborhood to you is a street, and it's where your children play, and it's where you talk to your neighbors in the front yard. It is also, the DOT's perspective is this is a state road. So we're trying to incrementally make your neighborhood look more like a neighborhood and feel more like a neighborhood so that there are visual cues for the drivers that they need to slow down. The only things that slow drivers down are narrow traffic lanes and obstruction, or not obstructions, but friction. So on-street parking and crosswalks and sidewalks, all of that stuff is what makes the difference. But if you have a wide open 2-lane with wide lanes, even if there's sidewalks on either side, if it's wide open and all the driver sees is a destination at the other end, they're not going to drive 30 miles an hour. These are the mistakes that have been made that we're trying to fix incrementally. But these mistakes have been made over 50 years or 60 years. And this project, I just want to reiterate, the DOT is going to build this project one way or the other. But what we're hoping to do is work with you, and all of your comments are super helpful. We want to work with you to set it up so the future of your road, your street, can get to where you want it to go. And the design work that we're doing right now, the planning work, it's relatively inexpensive to once the engineers from DOT and all of those other people get involved. So it's important that we hear from you and get this insight from you now so that we can build that into the design now while it's less expensive than it will be when we get the whole thing built. There's a certain point at which you can't turn back. We're not at that point. So I really appreciate your insights. Thank you.
Yeah, and one more comment to Lacey's sign, speed limit sign. It's all over the map throughout the whole village. I mean, coming in from Route 100 South or North, Shaker Road, Yarmouth Road, Brown Street. We're hoping to get to the point where we get a blanket 25 mile per hour throughout the whole village with the DOT.
One thing, coming toward the village on 115, there is a sign that says 30-mile speed limit coming up, and then the sign that actually says 30-mile speed limit is not there anymore, and I am hoping somebody already knows that.
That was a really big one. That was monster size. That said 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, it was a regular white, 30 miles an hour, and before it was the one that said 30 miles coming up. But the one that actually says 30 miles an hour is not there.
Is that coming into town?
Coming into town. Yeah. I mean, you just have to drive up, turn around, come back, and you'll see where I mean. It's right in between where it says 30 miles an hour coming up and the new sign that says, Village of Gray, please slow down in tiny type. And one other thing, I don't know if this is the law on a state road, and I don't monkey wrench for days, but what about bike lanes? I don't ride a bike, but I sometimes drive behind them, and I don't know if that's a regulation that has to be met, that there has to be a bike lane, as inconvenient as they are to me.
We'd love it if they followed complete streets, which they have their own policy, but that is not mandatory. But it is something that we are looking at on Main Street itself. There's two rules of thumb with bikes. Sometimes it's better for them to be in the traffic, and sometimes it's not, depending on the road.
Kathy Tombarelli, 9 Yarmouth Road. Just one thought on the sidewalk being on the North Street. Given that I've owned that house 27 years, and this has been a topic for all 27 of those years. If there's a chance that it could be 20 years before we get to this again, it might be better to have the sidewalk all on one side of the road, whether that's the south side or the north side, so that people don't have to cross twice. Just a thought.
Thanks, Kathy.
I was just wondering, actually, more in regards to the water main that's being replaced. Is that going to improve the water pressure at all? Because there's literally no water pressure, and I live next to the water tower.
If I understand correctly, the new line that's being proposed is a larger line than the one that is there now.
We actually have a water district member here, so I'm going to let him answer.
Okay, great.
So gravity has more to do with the water pressure than the line. So if you're still at the top of the hill, your water pressure will be a lot less than people at the bottom of the hill.
It's literally almost in my backyard. You think I'd have the best water pressure best
Hey, Tony Nuzzo. I'm at 50 Yarmouth Road. I had a question about management of like Japanese knotweed. I think there might be some of that on the north side of the road. And if we start tearing into that, it might be an issue for everyone very quickly.
Could you repeat what your concern was?
Yeah, Japanese knotweed on the north side of the road. Yeah.
In the vicinity of your location?
Well, we're on the south side of the road, so we'd like it to stay as far away from us as possible, but also, yeah, so worried about it crossing the street and everything.
So knotweed and invasive species is something we just started talking about. If you look at the North Raymond Road intersection, unfortunately, when the DOT does a project or these construction companies, and Will, please jump in, they use fill, and that fill is sometimes contaminated. And so when they plant it, the next spring, we have knotweed now down by North Raymond Road. The question for us as a council is what kind of pesticide, herbicide treatment do we allow if we're going to try to address that? Because we also have 3 lakes and a lot of watershed. And so we're just now starting to discuss that. I don't know from a planning standpoint if there's any consideration when you're going into a project or not, Will.
Yeah, I mean, we actually had a concern on, sorry for yelling at everybody. On Short Shaker Road, because where they had their stockpile, there was some Japanese knotweed back there, and we were concerned that it was going to get spread into the project, which we luckily, I think, avoided. But it's a very challenging issue. It spreads like wildfire, and it's really tough to control once it gets going. So there definitely needs to be some sort of a management when you've got established communities of it, like you're seeing up there at in the vicinity of your property on the other side of the road. Yeah, you don't want to get into it and spread it around, but once that stuff starts seeding and the seeds start blowing around in the wind, it can land anywhere. So the best thing is to kind of standardize a management practice, especially if it's within the right of way, and have the town public works or whoever deal with it as quickly as possible. But
so what happens if it does spread? Are they going to take that and manage that for you? Because right where you're talking.
The goal of this project would be to not get into it, especially if it's on the north side of the road in that location. But we have some ability in our specifications to put in language that if the contractor spreads it around, that they have to deal with the eradication of it after the fact and do what they need to do to get rid of it. But the goal in that location would be to not touch it if it's over on the other side of the road and not get anywhere near it. But
right, so I was just going to say that that's probably what we do is now that we've made the note of it, once we get further down in the planning.
If it is right next to existing driveways or things, though, I mean, we will be kind of adjusting some driveways on the north side as part of this project because we're adjusting the actual profile of the road, like I mentioned. So we've got to note that and make it very clear on the plans that this is here and we don't want it.
And you're filling out a survey right now, so if you know you have knotweed at your house or near your house, it would be wonderful if you wrote that on this little survey, so that as we're collecting information, we can.
And you said you're at 50. We definitely want to talk to you as well relative to that sidewalk on the south side of the road and kind of the existing tree buffer and just the topo in there. So we definitely want to chat with you folks.
Luke Anderson, 47 Yarmouth Road. Is the center line going to remain the same through the roadway?
Right now, the center line is intended to stay right where it is.
Hey, follow-up question. Have you all talked to the DOT to see how receptive they are to your plan, the 60 feet versus the 66, the roadway restrictions and so forth and so on? Have you run your conceptual plan by with the DOT and received some feedback, and what has that feedback been like?
So we haven't specifically talked about that issue with them yet, but I know Doug Webster has made some contact with several folks at DOT, so we're starting to talk about that at this point.
The town would very much like to stay with 60. If there's pushback from DOT on the 66, we're going to try to see if we can maintain the 60.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the environment or the demographic, I don't even know what you would call it, of the road itself, and you've seen the line on the drawings. 60 is probably enough. We know 60 is enough for what we want to do, and going beyond that would be very complicated for a lot of property owners, so.
Yeah, and that's why I just want to.
Yeah, so our stand is 60 is enough, and the DOT, as Doug pointed out, this was their project initially, they walked away, and it has been 50 years. So we have some funding, and we've volunteered to take the lead. They were very happy to let us take the lead, so we're hoping that we'll continue that nice conversation with them.
Is that a deal breaker for the town? I mean, I think I see, 66 feet being problematic, but if the DOT pushes back, does that kill this project?
We see it as problematic as well.
Okay, my name's Dennis Foley. I live at 42 Yarmouth Road. Once we sign off our rights to this right away and everything, if the DOT decides to go the 66 feet, they're going to take it anyway?
DOT can't.
So if you're agreeing to a 60-foot right-of-way, and the DOT hopefully will understand why it needs to be 60 feet, and that will be the end of it. If somebody wanted to do something outside the 60 feet, they'd have to come back to you to get a right-of-way in order to do that.
Okay.
So the 60-foot right-of-way is the perimeter for the infrastructure projects.
Hi, Pat Cleaves. Did you say there's going to be some construction for the stormwater on the north side of the road going down the hill?
Maybe closed drainage.
Yeah, so we're, again, talking with town staff about how we want to handle the drainage on that north side of the road going up the hill. Because since we're not building a sidewalk over there, right now, the plans show that ditch essentially remaining on that side. But I've expressed a little concern about that, and again, the challenge all comes down to cash, but.
Well, and I think that's a really important point that you bring up. If we were going to add to the scope, if we find out we do have additional money or we feel we need to add to the scope, the stormwater would probably be a higher priority than other things.
On that hill, we've been on that hill 45 plus years.
What number is it?
43.
43.
And there are at least 5 culverts between our driveway and the bottom of the hill.
Driveway culverts, yeah.
Which are never cleaned out.
No.
They have ditched the ditches, but they haven't cleaned the culverts. So the water therefore runs all the way down the road and freezes in the road.
Yep.
And causes more of a problem for anyone trying to walk.
Barely turn out as it is.
Talking inches of ice at the end of your driveway or the road.
A good storm puts 5 inches of ice at the bottom of
I'm
my
scared to
driveway,
leave
and
my
it's
home
already,
because
we're at 41. We already have one of the steepest driveways coming down into the road on the blindest part of the corner, and now we've got to do it with 5 inches of ice. I mean, taking a left out of our driveway is as near possible. I actually go down to the retirement center and come back up the hill just to go into Yarmouth. It's ridiculous. Yes, of course. Then my other concern with that too is if you guys are taking the road down to flatten it out, ease that embankment that's coming down, that puts the driveway even further below, or the road even further below.
I don't think we'll be touching
Going
the
that
road
far?
profile in your location.
Okay, it's gonna be
Making your
further
driveway
back up.
steeper. We've got to look at that very carefully when we're looking at adjusting the road grade in terms of how it impacts the driveways. So it's a very challenging design problem, because you've got to look at the driveways on both sides and make sure that you're not creating a nightmare for someone. So we'll be looking at that very closely, but I don't think our change in the profile is going to extend that far down to your driveway, I think.
And just in general, if there are driveway implications or, driveway culverts, the town, just like we did on Shaker, the town intends on treating you guys with respect and taking care of whatever we can.
Michael from 25 Yarmouth Road. I have a question. So what happens if not everybody signs off on the right of way?
We're cautiously optimistic that there's going to be support. It's been a problem for a long time, and we're going to be working with all the property owners as much as we can. We'll cross that bridge when we get to it, I guess.
Well, there was a comment earlier about if this isn't agreed upon, then the DOT is gonna take it anyway. So what does that mean? Does that mean they'll just widen the road and we don't get sidewalks or anything else?
This is what's called an MPI, Municipal Partner Initiative. It's funding from DOT and the town. The town is in the driver's seat for the design work. Yes, it does need to meet DOT standards, and ultimately, as I said at the beginning, the right-of-way will need to go to the state. But the town is in the driver's seat for the design work, and the town is going to be in the driver's seat for the right-of-way. That's exactly why we're trying to have this. So I said at the beginning, this is a town project.
Right, I think what she's saying is if we were, for whatever reason, not able to complete this project, it is a state-owned road. So eventually they will get around to it. It's been on their list for a really long time, but they will eventually get around to it, and then they will be in the driver's seat. So it does change the dynamic. It doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't get everything, but obviously having us being able to have these meetings and have you come in and tell us what you want and try to work with individual property owners, it's not going to be the same for every property owner. So it's really hard for us to say, one property owner, it may make no difference, the 60-foot right-of-way.
That's kind of the question, because the side where there's no sidewalks, what are you gaining? The side of the road where there's no sidewalks, by giving up that property and having no access to cross the road to the sidewalk, what are you gaining from that? That's essentially.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you're doing is you're allowing us to complete phase 1, which will significantly improve this road. I mean, there are some serious problems on the road.
If you put a sidewalk across the street, it's not going to improve that, because now you have everybody trying to cross to that side.
But I guess just think about this a little bit. So if we're not putting a sidewalk on both sides of the street, which again is a real challenge from a cost standpoint.
It's not even about a sidewalk on both sides, it's about access to get to that sidewalk from
But
both sides.
hear me out. I mean, unless I put a crosswalk at your property, which isn't going to benefit your neighbor or the neighbor 2 doors down, you're not going to have access to that sidewalk on the other side of the street either, because I can't put a crosswalk at everybody's driveway going up the hill.
Well, I understand that, but you're asking, saying, hey, will you give us this land and maybe in 10 years or 15 years we'll get a sidewalk on your side. So essentially, it doesn't do anything for you now. I mean,
Well, I would just point out there's no sidewalks on the road at all, and people are walking on it now. So what we're trying to do is try to address what we can and make it as safe as we can with the money we have available to us. Can we do it all in one? I would love to just redo all the roads in the village, but that's not feasible. We have limited tax dollars, and we're trying to do the very best that we can with the limited funds we have to get the most we can. And you have to have a little faith. It's hard. By the way, I live on Route 26, right down the street from Hannaford. I see kids riding bikes, I see kids on skateboards, I see people running, cycling, and they're tractor trailers. And if you think they go fast on Yarmouth Road, they go super fast in front of my house. So it is a problem, and it's a problem for a lot of people. So.
Thank you. At the very least, whichever side the sidewalk is on, the other side's going to have a wider, safer shoulder to walk on. Right now, we have exactly 6 inches to get from my house to the bottom of the hill, and it is absolute Russian roulette. With the people on their phones, with the people that, I mean, it is Russian roulette. So on either side. I liked what the woman said before about perhaps being on the south side, because that would eliminate the people from the Apple Tree Village having to cross the street to get to the north side. Most of them do not drive cars. So we see them walk right by our house, and we've offered, look, walk across the lawn. But there's 1 person, 2 people that are almost non-ambulatory, and I'll tell you what, that's death-defying for them. So either side, there at least will be a shoulder that would make it safer.
3-foot shoulder.
Yeah, I mean, like right now, that's 30 inches longer than, wider than 6 inches.
We don't have a shoulder, we have ditch.
You know,
how to cook, he doesn't do math.
Any other questions?
His wife was the math teacher.
And I think it's important to remember that we are looking to set up one-on-one interview meetings with each of you. So if you have some concerns that weren't talked about, you go home and you think about it a little bit more and you say, oh yeah, I should have asked this. Everyone is going to have to come in and talk to us to do right-of-way anyway, but if you want to have a longer one-on-one meeting, please make sure that you stop and sign up for that, and they'll be in touch with you and make sure that we can do it a day and a time that works for you. We're all in this together, and it isn't going to be perfect, and we understand that. Anytime there's a road project, there is good and there's bad. That's unfortunately the way it works. We're trying to get the best outcome we can. So if there's ways for us to change it to make it better, then we are definitely going to look at that. Once, as we said, we get the right-of-way work done, we will finalize plans. We will have another meeting. So we're not going to like, okay, thanks, we're going to finalize things on our own. We will have another meeting for you to come out and see the revised plans. And then we'll have to crunch the numbers. So a plan's wonderful. You look at it and say, that's great. And if it comes back at $3 or $4 million, we're going to have a problem. So we're going to have to sit down and decide, do we go after different funding? Do we change some of the scope? So I want to make that very clear to everyone. It isn't finalized until it's finalized, and it isn't done until we have the funding to do it. We're in a good position because we have TIF funding sitting there, and it's a nice sum of money, and hopefully the DOT will kick in a chunk, $625,000, hopefully. Yes.
That we construct the sidewalk all the way from Main Street to Hillcrest in one go. It might actually be split into two, or
so we can spread it over fiscal years.
Fraction thereof.
Yeah. Like a payment plan. Yep.
No interest.
Yep. All right. So, yep.
Just to
final and remind me of that.
Thank you. The surveys, it'd be great if you guys could leave those on your way out. If you can't, we really need them by next Monday. One of the next steps in the process here is to try to bring the consultant, the property professional on board, and we're trying to better understand the reading of the tea leaves, so to speak, with the property owner. So please, if you can on the way out, and if not, by this coming Monday, please, at the latest. I know it seems very early, but we need that baseline information to keep the wheel spinning with a vision towards the realizing construction in 2024.
At the town office waiting for them, their own packet, their own survey. We would really appreciate it. We'll be reaching out to everyone regardless, but it would just help move things along if you can do that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming.